Welcome back for another episode of the Vitamin C's podcast, proud part of the CLNS Media Network. I am your host, Tim Sheils, and I am joined by my buddy, my bro, Wayne Breezie Brown. And we're going to be covering everything that's been going on with the Celtics, including that crazy win over the Bucks, that back-to-back against the Jazz, and now they're going to be going into that Tuesday matchup against the 76ers, and we'll be taking a look at the seeding as well. First off, Wayne, how are we doing today, man?
I'm doing a lot better. I don't know. I must have came down with something over the weekend, but I'm feeling really good right now. And when the Celtics are winning, I mean, it heals all wounds, everything. It doesn't matter how sick you are. When your C's are up, the vitamins are doing myself really well. So keep the six Celtics wins going. 3 games left. I feel like we're going to finish strong. What do you think?
Yeah, it'll be pretty good. By the time that this show goes up tomorrow, we'll have a game against the 76ers, and then there'll be 3 more after that. So we got a Raptors, then Hawks game to wrap up
Double
the
Raptors.
season.
That's what it is.
I was
Raptors.
actually do so everyone we were supposed to record probably on Saturday, to be quite honest, following that back to back. I've been battling a cold, and I can't lie, those 2 wins, they kind of helped my mood a little bit. I think
It's
they
that
raised my
vitamin C.
spirits. So the vitamin C's, I did stay up on my vitamins, took that airborne and everything. So keeping up on my meds, got some sleep, got some shut eye. And finally I can breathe through my nose. So it's fantastic. You should have heard me before. I was talking like this.
You sound like,
So
did I do that? Did I do that?
did I do that? So Thursday night, the Celtics go into Fiserv Forum into Milwaukee, and they hand the Bucks an absolute drubbing. So
They
for me,
They gave the Bucks a buck whipping, bro.
ooh, I like that. So
Yeah.
what was your big takeaway? Because for me, honestly, this sort of sent this kind of message going into the final games of the season where you have no idea how things are going to wrap up, right? Ultimately, it kind of feels like it was them saying, "It doesn't matter where we play you. We're not afraid of you. We will go into your own house and pants you in front of everybody on national TV. We do not care." And I think that's sort of what that message was. I know that Middleton ended up leaving the game. He took an elbow to the face from Jalen Brown on a
Yeah.
drive. Hope he's all right.
Unintentional too, by the way,
Oh,
guys. If you didn't
clearly, it
get a
was
chance to see
definitely
it, it
it's
was
just a natural
unintentional.
motion. So I'm glad they didn't end up hitting him with a flagrant. I thought that they would.
I did
Um,
too.
just because if anyone ends up drawing blood, I usually feel like it ends up a flagrant, whether it's fair or not. Um, just unfortunate. I hope Middleton's okay. He did not, even before the injury there, where he ended up getting left from the game. He did not seem like the same player that I remember. I don't know about you, but he just did not seem to be the same impact guy. I don't know if this all these injuries catching up or what, but
Yeah.
it feels like he lost a step.
Yeah, he definitely lost a step, but then in this particular game though, he was hitting shot, he was hitting his threes. So I was like, uh-oh, don't let him heat up. I mean, it was Drew that they kind of like made sure they didn't let get hot and they were going to allow Middleton to have to shoot and beat them. But my biggest takeaway from the game was simply the way that they decided to defend Giannis. And when you want to talk about a wall, it was like the wall from Game of Thrones, yo. Like
Yeah, build the
nobody
wall.
was getting through, bro. Like
Yeah.
nobody, like Giannis couldn't get through. They were forcing the Bucks to shoot threes. So the Celtics were like, if you're gonna beat us, you're gonna have to make 3-point shots. And they didn't end up in the foul trouble like I thought they would because Giannis usually gets those calls when he drives to the paint. The referees or NBA officials actually let them play basketball. And you just talked about it because it was a Euro step move, the Jalen Brown to the injury to Chris Middleton. It was a Euro, and it was like I said, it was unintentional. And I think because it was like a Euro move opposed to like just driving to the basket. Usually when you do a Euro, you're trying to avoid the contact. And it just so happened that a body part hit him in the mouth. And so that's why they didn't call it the flagrant. But I thought the NBA officials were letting them play basketball. And I think I tweeted out earlier, like, this game feels like a game 7 finale in the NBA Eastern Conference Finals. That's what it felt like the whole game.
Yeah, and I mean that kind of energy is sort of what you expect from these teams going against each other. They've got such a history at this point. Jason Tatum acknowledged that in, after the game, everything going up into that matchup. Tuesday kind of left a really bad taste in their mouth after that loss to Washington. That was clearly a game that we talked about before. They shouldn't have dropped. And so they really, really brought it against an opponent like Milwaukee, who very well likely they will see down the line. Now, because of that loss to Washington and everything that happened with that Bucks game, the Celtics do have the tiebreaker against Milwaukee. And the one thing is because of the way seeding is right now, it is very, very unlikely that the Celtics move from the 2 seed. They could fall out of it if Philly goes on a win streak, wins the rest of their games, and Boston drops enough. But Boston has a tiebreak over Philly as well, and Milwaukee's been too good. Sunday's matchup against the 76ers between the Bucks and Sixers. If the Sixers won, it would have been a different story for the Celtics going into Tuesday night's matchup. But right now, it looks like the Celtics are probably going to end up hanging in that 2 seed. I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like that's okay because of the matchups that they're going to end up facing in the playoffs because of it. Right now, we've got the Bucks in first still, 2 games ahead of the 2 seed Celtics. Celtics are 3 games ahead of the 76ers. And then in fourth, you've got the Cavaliers, who are 5.5 back of the Celtics. So they're probably going to end up staying in that 4 seed. One thing that I do like if the Celtics do end up staying in that 2 spot, though, they avoid the Cavaliers up until the conference finals if they happen to get there. Just because I think like a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers poses a lot of matchup issues, and out of the teams in the East, they actually scare me a lot. Probably on the level of the Bucks, just because of mismatch issues that they offer up, I guess.
Yeah, look, I don't. I think the Celtics are putting out the blueprint. Like, don't mess with us, because like we're on. And so here's the thing, right? Like, if it revolves around Jason Tatum, and if he's hitting his 3-point shots, there's not a team in the league that's going to be able to see the Boston Celtics. It's when he's not hitting his 3-point shot and he continues to try to push his way to try to hit the 3-point shot. And then it just gives the other team baskets in transition and, things like that. But he seems to be back. The past 2 games, he's hitting his shots. I don't have his stats right in front of me, but I can definitely look them up while we're doing our show. And his percentages from the last 2 games have been dag near phenomenal. I'm talking like MVP esque type of percentages from the three. And you saw in the Bucks game, you're like, oh man, he missed a couple. And then he just took this one that you just didn't think was going to go in. And once that went in, it's been on Jason Tatum. He's been ice. And so I'm looking at like how this team is constructed. Did we get like a little bit of short of a rotation from Joe Mazzulla? Like, are we starting to see what the playoff situation may be like, or do you still feel like he's kind of this, just toying around with it? But we got great minutes from some of the players, key role players. Grant Williams gave you great minutes. Oh my gosh, I said his name right. And so things. If you guys have been listening to this podcast, it's been Grant Hill for the past 2 months. But seriously, like, you're getting good minutes, and this is what we need from the Celtics, right? You need good minutes from the role players, and all they got to do is come in there and just play their role. They don't have to do extra; they just have to do their role. And that's why you see the Celtics dominate, even against the Jazz. Like, they were literally dominating, and then of course they take their feet off the gas. And they start allowing the Jazz to kind of like shoot their way back into the game, but they still won convincingly. Like, you knew that they were going to pull out and win that particular game. And I'm just like, once the playoffs hit, you mentioned some really good teams like, the Cavs and some of these lower seeded teams that are going to have to play. I just feel like as long as the Celtics do not play down to their competition, Tim, we're going to be just fine. Like, we have to think that they're the Bucks, no matter what. Whoever we play first, oh, it's the Bucks, cool. Who we play second, the Bucks, cool. Then you get the Bucks, and then when you get to the finals, you play the Bucks again. Once the Celtics put that in their mental, they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, and I did pull up those stats for Tatum. Over those 2 games between the Bucks and the Jazz on Friday, it was a combined 79 points, 24 of 35 from the field, 13 of 18 from three, 18 of 19 from the line, 19 rebounds, and a plus 43 in 67 minutes, and 0 turnovers. Um, this is from Taylor Snow. All these stats are.
That is 72% from the 3-point line.
It's one of the most efficient mistake-free 2-game stretches by a player in NBA history. It's like it's only ever been done a handful of times. Like, it's incredibly rare. Uh Only one player in NBA history has scored more points on fewer field goal attempts in a two-game span, and that was Joel Embiid back in 2021, January 2021. So, yeah, good. MVP level, good kind of player, especially in those two games. And he came out and talked about it in terms of that Friday game. So I mentioned this before we got on because you weren't aware of this story, but there were some significant travel issues that the Celtics ended up dealing with going into that Friday game at home against the Jazz. So, following the Milwaukee win on Thursday, the Celtics were scheduled to fly out that night to get back to Boston for their game the next day. However, they got on the flight. They're waiting, they're waiting, they're waiting. They were sitting on the tarmac for probably about 25, 30 minutes. Their pilot ended up being sick and too ill to actually fly the plane. They couldn't find a replacement pilot, so they had to then deboard the plane, go back to a hotel. Now they get to the hotel, and apparently there's issues trying to find rooms for everybody. So by the time it wraps up, Marcus Smart said this. This is in a piece in the Athletic. I believe it's Jay King. Um, 2 in the morning. It's 2 in the morning by the time they get everything figured out. So they have to go to bed at 2 in the morning, then get up in the morning to go back to Boston. They By the time they get back to Boston, flight lands at about 1:30 PM Friday for a night game, I believe 7:30 tip-off against Utah. So, while all of this stuff is going on, Jason Tatum at the time, because it's a back-to-back, because you're trying to rest guys down the stretch, it was totally, no pun intended, up in the air that Jason Tatum was supposed to play on Friday. And he said as much in his post game presser. And ultimately, there was a conversation that was had between all of the guys on the plane where they all agreed, hey, yeah, we're going to end up playing. Jason Tatum said, I'm going to end up playing. I want to go out there. I want to rock with my guys. We're going to figure it out. It might be ugly, but we're going to go out there and find a way to win it. And they did. I think that's just kind of like a galvanizing moment for this team. And they talked about it as much too. Apparently in their, in the locker room after that win against the Bucks, they said, all of this stuff, like this win just doesn't matter if we go out and we fall on our face against Utah. And we could have used excuses. We could have used the back to back. We could have used the travel issues and all of that stuff as a reason why to come out flat and lose to the Jazz after this, massive win against Milwaukee, but they didn't. And they came out and they won. And that feels to me like very much like a turning point in the season and it hitting the Jets at the right time. This is after these fast few games that we've seen from them. This is the switch getting flipped. Like there's no question anymore, to me at least.
Yeah, we a lot of us talk about the hashtag, green runs deep and things like that. I mean, it doesn't get any deeper than this. And as much as I want us like the fans to bleed green and it run deep and all that type of stuff, it really hits home when you watch the players show you how much it runs in their veins, right? And so this is adversity. This is adversity. And when you have the veteran players faced with the adversity, you usually see them go through it as leaders, and the youngins they follow right along suit. And this is what makes a team, right? So this is what's going to make this separate this team from, maybe if this was 4 or 5 years ago, younger players might not have been able to get through something like this. They might have complained, might have did this, might have been tired, didn't want to show up, whatever. But what we know is they did show up. What we do know is Jason Tatum decided to say, you know what, bump the back to back. I'm a leader of this team. Let me be a leader. Go by going out there and showing that I'm a leader. And he did this, that. What did he drop? 39 that night, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, Tatum balled out against the Jazz. Hey,
Yeah, it was 39.
yeah, dude was balling. I mean, you could have told me he was tired. I'd have been like, tired how?
How tired? Not
How
tired enough.
tired? What was he tired? Too tired to get 40? I'm just curious. Like, you get what I'm saying? So this is what I'm talking about. This is leadership. I don't know if like I know in football, certain players wear the C on their chest. I don't know if they have that in basketball.
They do, but it's not common.
Okay. Okay. So this to me shows you like who your captains are. And I would say that the way this team is constructed is so perfectly, right? It's so perfectly balanced. I mean, you have your veteran players, like your Al Horfords, right? And then you stack it with some veteran depth, like a Blake Griffin. And then you have your longest tenured player and Marcus Smart, right? And so he's a veteran. And then you just surrounded by your youth, your talent, and then you just continue to kind of like build from there. And this team is literally built. And you talked about this on a couple of pods ago, like how Tatum and Brown has literally been playing for a championship since their rookie season. Like they've been playing some of the best LeBron James players in the NBA. And it's the way the East is set up. They showed you a blueprint on how to beat Milwaukee, right? They own the tiebreaker against that team. So that means they beat them throughout the season, right? And so that lets you know that this team is built to win. And it's really cool to see this happen. I know we sit here on this show, Tim, and we complain when we lose, but we're complaining because we're losing because we're literally beating ourselves. And it's not a shot at the other teams that actually go out there and beat us. It's literally like the Celtics do dumb stuff. Like, what are you doing? Like what? And that's what we question. Like, and so when they're playing high IQ type of basketball, this team has zero problems, and it's really hard to beat them.
Yeah, and I think saying that they could, they get in their own way sometimes. I think that's kind of the definition of a team when they get bored. And I think that was something that we talked about a few times before, but like really after they went out and they beat the bag out of Sacramento and then they come back and they go against Milwaukee on the road and they end up beating them too. Like that's not something that a team does unless they are capable of, winning a championship. I don't think teams like you just don't do that's not something that happens normally. And you can make whatever excuses you want. Like you had people saying, "Oh, well, Milwaukee, it was their fifth game in 7 days and it was a back-to-back." And you know what? If the shoe was on the other foot, no one would have said anything. If it was the Celtics who were on the back-to-back who ended up losing. Like it's just not something that happens very often that you see a team go in there and just blow the doors off another team. It wasn't even like it was close or that, Milwaukee just had a bad stretch of play. No, they were straight up just outclassed in that game. And that's what kind of gives me confidence going into the playoffs in this unit right now, as currently constituted. That being said, looking at some of the matchups that might end up happening here. So if they do stay at that 2 seed, you're looking at the Miami Heat most likely or the Hawks. The play-in tournament has to happen first, so it's probably I think it's 7 and 8 play first, and 9 and 10 play first. Winner of 9 and 10 goes on to play the loser of 7 and 8, and then the winner of that becomes the 8 seed. So my guess is that it's the Heat. And for a first round series, I think it's tough. Don't get me wrong. It's tough. There's
Yeah,
familiarity there. Eric Spoelstra is arguably still like the best coach in the NBA. He's
yeah,
so seasoned. He's won championships before. Um, a lot of respect for him. That being said, I think this is a really good test for the Celtics in the first round. In terms of a first round opponent, this is not a soft one or an easy one. They
mhm,
might be a 7 seed, but they are capable of making a deep run. They've got good players. They might not be playing up to snuff this year. They might have health issues or whatever. It's still a team that you have to come out and respect. And I think for the Celtics, that's going to be a really good warm up for round two, which most likely is going to be the winner of the 76ers and Nets. I'm banking on the 76ers making it to the second round. Granted, again, a team that the Celtics have handled this year, and I think that they will handle, but it's still Joel Embiid. It's still James Harden. James Harden in the playoffs is a different animal completely.
totally different James Harden.
Totally different James Harden. And he's also apparently, this is where I'm fine with them falling into the 2 seed. He's apparently dealing with some kind of Achilles injury and
Oh
has been
no.
dealing with it for some time. So there's been some discomfort. He sat out a couple games because he literally could not uh, it was
Um,
so uncomfortable he could not play with it. So he's been dealing with some health issues there too. So if that is that serious, I have no problem facing them in round two. But you cannot overlook the Miami Heat in round one, and I think that's okay. I think they need to have that kind of tough matchup.
yeah, I mean, there's no way to avoid it. So it's either going to be the Heat. I mean, even if we play the Hawks, it's going to be tough. I don't care if we
Three
did
point
win.
shooting team,
It's just
very good
yeah,
offensive team still.
you get what I'm saying? And they're athletic down there in the bigs. And so like it's gonna be a tough matchup, you know? I mean, personally, I guess you can say I'd rather deal with Miami, but then the thing you get with Miami, like that the icing on the cake is Eric Spoelstra, like his experience and his grit and his ability to coach, his players. And so, like to me, that's the key. I'd rather see the Hawks in that situation. But like you said, you believe if that happens, Miami would end up being that seed that will end up playing. And so here we go, right? And when I think about the matchup between Miami, do we match up against them well? This year we did. I thought we took care of business when we needed to, but there's one player that I know will come through in the playoffs, and I don't care if he's hurt or not hurt or with a broken leg, he'll still play. Like, and we're talking about Butler, and he will give us problems. I don't know why, but that's what he does. And it seems like when he plays against the Celtics, no matter how great the defense is, the mother freaker can score all from all points of the court. It's just like, dude, what are you doing? And so maybe that's the game plan. Let him play out, take away Bam and their 3-point shooting and make Butler beat you. But just know those games will be tough, like you said, Tim, and it may be 7 games. I wouldn't be surprised if they
Yeah.
take the 7 games, the first series, which sucks for the Celtics. But this is why I say the Celtics, with this adversity that they're facing, they have to build the endurance and look at every series as a 7 game series. So, however they got to rest their minutes, Coach Missoula, you got to figure that out. But you gotta look at every series as a 7 game series.
Yeah, and you talk about rest. I mean, right now, the Celtics are very, very close to locking down that 2 seed. So before, I don't know if Sunday's game affects this, but going into Sunday's matchup between the Bucks and the Sixers, the Celtics' magic number to lock in the 2 seed was 2 games. So that might have changed because the 76ers did drop one on Sunday. If anything, that might mean it's a game and a half. Um, so the Celtics do play again by the time this drops, they're going to be playing the Sixers that night on Tuesday, 8 o'clock tip off Eastern time. Once they clinch the 2 seed, rest guys. Like you might have to play certain guys. You don't want people to get cold, but don't don't hesitate to cut back on minutes. Throw JD Davis in some minutes. Hopefully Peyton Pritchard's ankle is not bothering him as much. I know that I think we got some kind of update today at practice. I'm not sure what the status change was, but he re-aggravated against the Wizards, so I'm hoping that he's doing better now. But you have to keep an eye on that. You got to stagger some of these guys in and just eat up some minutes. They ended up doing that because they rested Al and Rob against Utah. You saw Blake Griffin get the start there, and they turned to Cornette, they turned to Muscala. Grant Williams obviously got some run too. So they've been turning to their bigs when they've needed it, and now you're going to start to see that with the rest of the roster. So Tuesday, going against the 76ers, that game going to be tough,
Mhm.
and Sixers still very much have to play for stuff right now. Um, I think they're going to stay where they're at, but they probably don't want to fall into the 4 seed, 3 seed, just so they can have home court as long as possible. And for Philly, like I said, they're dealing with some injuries on their own. Obviously, Boston is very much a test for them.
Yeah.
They're 0-3 against them this year. They probably want to try and have a game where you're going against the top seed. You just lost to the Bucks on Sunday, and convincingly too. The
Yeah.
Bucks had their number. They were all over them. So,
Philly tried to push back, but Giannis was too much.
and that's kind of what it is, right? Like I think for all of the stuff that's going on in Philly, their window might be closing sooner rather than later. I don't know if that's a hot take, but Joel Embiid coming out and saying there's more to do than just contend for a championship. What's basically he was saying was talking about being in the playoffs, for multiple years and being a playoff team
Yeah.
versus actually contending for a championship. And it's that's not comforting to hear from a star player going into the playoffs. Like if Jason Tatum said that stuff, I would be really,
Bothered,
really
right?
concerned. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would be concerned, man. You already got the rumors about James Harden potentially going back to Houston. I don't know how likely that is. Yeah, that's like a whole thing, man. That's a whole thing.
Wow.
I don't know if that'll happen, but he
Well,
could.
I'll tell you when it'll happen if the Celtics see them and they take care of business.
Well, and that's the other thing too, right? It's like if they end up falling in the second round, From
It
from
seems
what I've seen,
ridiculous.
they Celtics Lab had Kai Carlin. If you haven't watched the episode, go ahead and check it out. Kai Carlin writes for Sixers Wire, but he was
Nice.
talking about basically if the Sixers end up losing the second round to whoever, if it ends up being the Celtics, it's the Celtics. If they end up failing the second round again, they're looking at full on wholesale changes to that entire team. And For the Celtics, that's great. It means there's another team in the East you don't have to worry about, in my opinion.
Finito. Yeah, I mean
And you
that's
wonder what happens with Joel at that point too.
there's no there's no
Just
way they
saying.
shop him. They
No.
would have to figure that. There's no way they shop Joel.
Is
They'll
the only constant. That's the thing for them
yeah,
too.
they'll have to continue to find a way to build around him. I mean, he's still an all-star. He's still
Oh yeah.
a all NBA player. I don't think
MVP caliber
yeah,
guy for sure.
MVP every season, year
Mm.
Cal. I don't think you move on from that if you're Philly, but it's gonna take a minute. But he might want to move on because it might take too long to rebuild. That's a
Yeah.
good point, Tim. I'm glad you brought that up. But to me, for this, that means that we're taking care of business.
And that's what I want. I mean, we'll see. Going into this Tuesday matchup, you hope the Celtics come out, especially after that win against the Bucks. This is another team. Again, you're probably going to see down the line, based on what the standings are right now. You're going to see them in round two. You take care of business round one. So that being said, is there anything else you want to talk about, Wayne, before we wrap up today?
No, man, I just feel like the Celtics are gonna finish strong. Boston
Yeah.
strong. Let's go.
Hell yeah. With that, we're going to wrap up the show today. Thanks very much for everybody listening. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. Let us know what you want for content. And again, part of the CLNS Media Network. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.